correctly there. So let's clear the screen here now. Let's make it a little bit bigger here where we can see everything. What we wanted to do now, we want to add the DHCP server row, and to do that we do a start /w OC setup, and we'll get that DHCP server row installed on the server core. Okay, we've got a row installed. Now we want to set our DHCP server to auto start, and to do that we do an SC space config space DHCP server space start equal, and you want to make sure that you leave one blank space in between your equal and your auto, and it should work okay for you, and it's successful. Now we want to start our DH server, so we do a net space start DHCP server and hit enter, and it's trying to start here. Okay, our server was started successfully. The next thing we want to do, we will set up our IP range scope, and to do that you do a net sh space DHCP space server, and our server address is the 192.168.1.103. We're going to add our scope, which is our network, and it's going to be 192.168.1.0, and our IP mask 255.255.255.0. Right now we're just adding the our scope of our network, which is the 1.0. We'll add our IP range in here in a second. So let's hit enter on this to set our scope on our network. It's completed successfully. Okay, we've got our scope set on our network of 1.0. So let's add our IP range for our scope. And to do that, you do a net sh space DHCP space server, our server address, which is 1.103. Our scope is our network scope, which is 1.0, and then we'll do space. We'll add IP range, and we're doing the 192.168.1.1 to 1.254. That's the complete network of the 1.0. So we want to include all of it on our IP range, and you do that first, and then you do your exclusion and reservations after you set your range. So we'll set our range first. Okay, our range completed successfully on our scope of our network there. Now I'm going to set up my exclusions, and I'm going to use net sh DHCP space server, our server address, which is 1.103, our scope on our network, which is 1.0, and here we're going to use add exclude range, and we're going to exclude everything. We're going to not assign these IPs out of the 1.1, and we're going to go up to 1.103. And so let's set up our exclusions here, and it completed successfully. Okay, now we're going to set up our reservation, And to do that, you do a NetSH DHCP server IP address, and ours is 1.103. Our scope on our network is 1.0, and we're going to add a reserve IP, and this 1.102 is the IP, but it's got to match this MAC address that, as I mentioned earlier, the 000 Charlie that I showed you earlier. This is the MAC address of that 802 server, and we'll hit enter here, and it's successfully. Let me bring the screen up here a little bit. Now we're going to be adding our option 003, which is our gateway address, and we did a NetSH space DHCP server space our IP address or our DHCP server, which is 1.103, our scope of our network, which is 1.0. We're going to set option value 003, capital IP address, and then the address, and we're going to use the gateway address of 192.168.1.1. Okay, our option was set okay. So now we're going to set the our option 006 up, and which is our DNS server. So we do a NetSH DHCP server, our server address of 1.103. Our scope is our network of 1.0. We're going to set option value 006, capital letters IP address, and the address of our DNS server is 192.168.1.100, and hit enter on this, and that'll set our DNS server up in our DHCP server. Now we want to activate our DHCP server, and to do that you do a set state of 1, and that'll activate it. A state of 0 will inactivate it. So we want to do the NetSH DHCP server, our server IP address, our scope of our network, set state to 1, and let's hit enter here. Okay, it completed successfully. So now we want to authorize it, and to do that we want to initiate and authorize to our Active Directory. We do a NetSH space DHCP space server initiate space, and I've abbreviated authorize here. It'll let you do that on this command, and we'll hit enter on it. Okay, it's completed successfully. So it looks like our DNS server is set up. So what let's do now, let's flip over here to our 801, and let me close this out, and we're going to set this to change the IP address on it. We're going to manage the network connections, and then we're going to change our IP on our local area connection by going into the properties and going into our IPv4 and doing properties. And right now we've got our 801 set to 1.1. So let's change all this out and say OK and close it. Close all this out. Let's go down here and get us a command prompt, and let's do an IP config space renew, and right there it is. It was, you know, before we changed it to getting a dynamic IP, it was 101. Now it's changed it from our DHCP server to 104, and it does have our default gateway in there. So let's make sure that it's assigned the DNS server correctly, and so to do that we'll have to do the all command to see our DNS settings, and sure enough right there our DNS settings is 1.100, and that is the instructor 01, our domain controller, and it's even picked up our DHCP server. So 801 picked up okay. So let's do the same thing over here. Let's go in and change the from static to dynamic on our 802, and this is the one that we done a reservation on to receive the 102, the 1.102 address by the MAC address. Let's see if it's working correctly. Go into properties on our local area connection, and we'll look at the IP version 4. We'll change both of these. Click OK and OK, and then when it gets through here, we'll close all out. What I'm going to do on this one, get a command prompt, and I'm going to do a release on the IP first. IP config /release. Okay, now let's do an IP config renew. Let's give it a minute here. Okay, looks like it did pick up the correct address that time. Let's do an all, make sure it picked up all of it correctly. Okay, it's got our IP address of 1.102. Notice here's that MAC address that we put in the reservation of 00 Charlie, and let's see, it's picked up the default gateway setting we put in our DHCP server. It's picked up our DNS server 1.103, and it's picked up our DNS server 1.100. So it looks like our DNS server is working correctly. That concludes this tutorial. Thank you.